Our speaker today, wonderful guy, great Omahan, didn't want to give a speech. Asked if I would join him on stage, and he'll talk and we'll chat a little bit. He's a financial advisor at RBC Wealth Management. He's been honored nationally and recognized as one of the country's top financial advisors by Financial Times, Barron's, Money Magazine. He's handled the WCA Foundation account for 2 decades, along with his son Corey, member of the Bellevue University Athletic Hall of Fame, has volunteered for many good causes and organizations in Omaha. In 2006, from President George W. Bush, he personally received a Presidential Service Award here in Omaha. Ladies and gentlemen, his name is John. Nobody calls him that. Please welcome Buzz Garlock.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all. Mike, if you want to keep talking about me, that's okay. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you for all that you've done for the community over the last 40 years. That's greatly appreciated. And I'd also like to say thank you to the honorees today. We're going to hear about 10 very unique individuals that have done an awful lot for the Omaha community. So I think a round of applause for them and past honorees would be appropriate at this point in time. So thank you, guys. And then I'd also like to very quickly mention the WCA staff and volunteers that a lot of times they're working very uniquely behind the scenes, and they don't get a lot of recognition. So from the bottom of my heart, WCA staff and volunteers, thank you so much for all that you do.
Definitely.
Mike mentioned that 3 years ago now that you did the heartfelt presentation about Bridget. I was in tears. I may be in tears later on, so please excuse me if I am, but I asked Mike to come back and help me give the presentation rather than doing 10 minutes of just talking to you. It's going to be interactive in just 1 second, but I had just a couple of prepared comments that I wanted to make. You guys know Mike has been doing the World Herald articles for a lot of, how long now, Mike?
47 years.
47 years.
I was 6 years old as a child prodigy. Unbelievable.
But I've always admired how Mike can put into a very succinct article, sometimes, I don't know how many columns it is, but it's maybe a quarter of a page at most. He can very succinctly go ahead and put such a really cool human interest story, so much emotion and information into a short amount of space like that, probably even more so than some authors do in an entire novel. So I've always admired him for that. The other thing that I've always bragged about Mike is that he knows everybody in Omaha. You know, how many of you guys? Yeah, he really does. And I was talking to my son Corey about it, who works with me, and then he also volunteers at the WCA. But I was telling Corey, I go, Mike has a very deep Rolodex, and Corey goes, Dad, nobody even knows what a Rolodex is anymore. So certainly date myself in that. And the other thing that, you know, Mike spoke a couple years ago, and the WCA was gracious enough to ask me if I'd speak here today. And, you know, you guys are probably wondering too, 60-ish-year-old guys, why are we speaking at a women's tribute, right? And I'm really not a thought leader in intersectional feminism by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm really not speaking for myself. I'm really speaking for my sister, Jill Garlock. And I know I've already talked to some of you here yet, even this afternoon. And Jill was a teacher and a coach at Burke High School, and she was shot and killed 30 years ago. So that's what we're really here to talk about.
Remember her well.
Yes,
great athlete, way better than you. I remember that.
Many are, that's for sure. But when I first got the call inviting me to go ahead and present, I was hesitant. I asked him if I could wait a couple days and think about it. It's just because I can talk about investments, I can talk about politics, I can talk about sports very easily, but when it comes to my sister's death, it's difficult. And so my son Corey mentioned to me, he goes, "Dad, you really need to do this for 2 reasons." He said, "Number 1, to honor your sister Jill, and number 2, you believe in the WCA mission, and you really need to do this." So I thought about it over the weekend, and I called back and said, yes, I'd be honored to go ahead and do the presentation today. I'd like to thank and recognize Corey for talking me into doing this. Where's Corey? Is he out there? No, he's on vacation backpacking in Japan somewhere. So thanks a lot, Corey. But I just wanted to, again, Mike, say thank you. And with that, I think, why don't we go ahead and
well, good. Well, just for a little background, tell us a little bit about your family, Buzz.
Well, I'm a Bellevue guy. My dad was in the Air Force, so we got stationed a lot of different places, ended up at Bellevue. Mom and Dad were both good athletes. They met at Ursinus College in Philadelphia, back east. But my dad played basketball and baseball. My mom actually played field hockey at Ursinus College. But that's not important. What is they were terrific role models, and they really taught work ethic, golden rule, if you want to call it that, and just discipline. So
picture up there on the screen?
That's the family. So Judy, my sister Judy, was a pretty good athlete, but some of you are too young to remember this, but back in the early 70s, Title IX, up until Title IX, women were not playing. Mike, you certainly you had been in the sports writing business for 20 years by then, hadn't you?
Right, 1972 was Title IX.
But think about that. Up until then, there was men's sports, but no women's sports at the high school level. And I did just want to read this quote from Sam Harris because I thought it was so appropriate as it relates to Title IX and maybe a couple other unresolved issues about inequality. Sam Harris wrote, "We will embarrass our descendants just as our ancestors embarrass us. This is moral progress." So I thought that was appropriate relative to this. But that was my sister Judy. My brother Jim lives down in Arkansas, but he was a high school All-American swimmer at Westside, and then he won and swam at Arkansas. I was fortunate enough to play ball at Bellevue University, and then my sister was involved, as Mike, as you know.
So tell us a little more about Jill.
Well, same issue with Title IX in high school for her. She wasn't able to play because they didn't have high school sports. And at what was then called Kearney State College, again, I date myself, Kearney State College, she played basketball, ran track, swam, and I'm trying to think the other thing she did, but she was obviously very athletic there and was the first woman inducted into the Hall of Fame, too.
Yeah. Ironman, too, right?
Ironman, thank you. And if you guys, triathlons are difficult, right? But the Ironman is the most difficult of that, where triathlon, you will swim 2.4 miles, get out of the water, go ahead and bike for 112, and oh, by the way, after that, you have to run a full 26, so it's back to back to back. And you have to be very, very disciplined as an athlete to do that. But
I remember years ago, you told me that you ran a marathon in honor of Jill and your friend Budge Porter, who is here. Where do they get these names? These cool nicknames, Budge, Buzz, I could be Bubba or something.
Yeah, so,
I don't know.
But that is accurate. I think he even wrote something, one of your articles about that. But as a tribute to my sister Jill and Budge Porter, who is...
He's over there. Hey, Budge.
Yep. Budge, I won't make you stand up for this, but time out for just 1 second. He can't stand because he had a terrible football injury at Nebraska, playing Nebraska football. But for that marathon, Mike, what I did is I wrote Jill's name on one shoe and Budge's name on the other shoe, and I just kept on picking them up and putting them down. But I will mention, Budge, even in a wheelchair, you stand higher than anybody I know. Love you, buddy.
His wife Diane is here too. Diane, can you wave and stand up? Got 3 great kids.
I guess, Mike, other than that, my sister was involved in coaching and teaching at Burke High School. She was a tennis and swimming coach back in the day, and all her students and athletes loved her, and it was just quite an honor.
There was quite a beautiful letter, I think, that the students wrote after
in your
she
programs,
died.
there is an insert that, I'm not going to attempt to go ahead and do anywhere near as good a justice as what this was the students at Burke High School that wrote shortly after she was killed.
I remember that so well. What a shock, and it was very traumatic. And we'll talk about that in a second. But there was another defining moment in your life. What was that?
There's been a number, as there is with everybody, but as it relates to the WCA, the one I guess that I would highlight is when I was a junior in high school. I was 16 years old. My dad died of a heart attack driving to my first varsity basketball game. That's when Bellevue was just Bellevue. There wasn't East and West, so that was 1970. But the reason why I bring that up is because we had 4 kids, as you see. My mom, on a teacher's salary, had to go ahead and become very, very strong and support 4 kids. And I had a chance, I don't know if you call it that. I saw firsthand what, somebody had just become a widow, what they had to do in this situation. And I can't help but think of how things might have been a little bit easier for her had the WCA programming been available then, because there's the empowerment program, the financial wellness, and all sorts of other support groups. But that's why I wanted to bring that up, Mike.
I know of another defining moment in your life. You met somebody. Who was that?
Becky.
And she's here today, too.
If she stood up,
Becky, could you stand up?
You still couldn't see her. She's only 5'1", but
there she is,
there
next
she is.
to Budge.
She's over by Budge. But it would be unwise to go ahead and not mention my wife as a defining moment in my life, right? So, but she has certainly made me a better person. So, the other positive thing that I wanted to talk about as far as defining moments, Mike, was I got involved in Leadership Omaha, and it's sponsored through the chamber, and I was in the great class number 13, and as I date myself, I think they're in 40 or 41 now. So this was early on, and one of the things that they asked us to do was go ahead and do some volunteer work at a nonprofit. Because my dad had died and because I thought I could relate to the kids at Boys Town, I did some volunteer work right away out there, and then that turned into, I've been doing a stock picking contest, help with reading mentoring, and I had the opportunity for 10 years. I helped coach varsity and JV basketball and then 8th grade basketball for a while. That was, as you can imagine, Mike, very fun.
What was it like receiving that award from the President of the United States?
Oh, it's just an everyday event, I hope we've got a picture of that because it was kind of funny. Is there a picture of, there we go. How many of you guys watched Seinfeld? There was an episode about the close talker. I will just say that I am not the close talker, it was the president. But he was a very affable, he wanted to talk about the College World Series, and then his handler said, Mr. President, we need to
What was that award for?
That, Mike, was for volunteer work here in the Omaha community, but to be clear about that, it wasn't that I won an award. Boys Town nominated me to represent all the volunteers in the city of Omaha, so that was a great honor to be able to receive that award, but it was not just for me, it was for everybody. So that was really cool.
You're still involved with North Star? Are you board chairman there?
I have been, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with North Star on 49th and Ames Street. We've been open for about 4 years now. We're serving 3rd through 8th grade boys. I'm on the board, actually chairman of the board right now, Mike, but we're serving some at-risk young men, and our model is after Girls Inc., by the way. Why not go ahead if there's somebody doing it right? We're trying to do that. We're right now serving During the school year, about 120 kids. During the summer, we've got roughly 200 kids and a lot of chaos during the summer camp program.
You've mentioned an interesting phrase to me. I wanted to ask you to kind of explain it. Find your own Calcutta.
Yeah. This is really kind of cool that, Mother Teresa served marginalized people through her hospice center in Calcutta, India, right? And oftentimes you get people requesting, saying, hey, I would like to come work with you and help you in Calcutta. And her answer was always the same, and that was, find your own Calcutta. Don't do what I'm doing, find what your Calcutta is. And I just think that's really cool. And I would submit to you, if you're a parent, your first Calcutta always should be your kids, without a doubt. But when you get past that, I think it's got to be whatever is passionate to you. Now, I'm trying to help, kids that have some difficult lives, upbringing. My sister's Calcutta was certainly being a mentor to kids at Burke High School and other places.
Can you tell us about the tragic event of April 11th, 1986?
I can, and this is where it gets a little bit difficult, Mike. So
we're all here for you.
I know that. You've got a lot of good friends here. But I guess I'll mention first off that in today's world, we're almost on a daily basis hearing about a shooting and a murder or a mass murder or a terrorist incident. And unfortunately, it happens so often that we become very callous to it. But when it happens to you in your own family, to a family member, it's very different. I hope that you can just hear it from me and never have to experience it, because it's awful. But this was back in April of '86, and I was actually working in Lincoln. I got a call from my mother, and she said, Buzz, I need you to come back to Omaha to Jill's house. Jill is dead. And so I drive back from Lincoln to Omaha, and I'm thinking, because she's so athletic and always doing stuff, she'd do too much, actually, in some cases. I just assumed that she had probably had a heart attack or died somehow through some kind of overexertion. But when I got back to Jill's house, I see yellow tape in front of her yard, and right away I knew there was some kind of act of violence. And as I tried to walk up front, the policeman goes, "No, you can't go in. You can't disturb a crime scene," until he knew that, I mentioned why his brother, and he went in. But what had happened in this case was Jill's ex-boyfriend, he had been stationed off at Air Force Base and had been transferred somewhere else. He drove back to Omaha to confront her about, she wanted to break up with him, basically. It's a lot longer story than that, but we're trying to get to it real quickly. So tried to confront her, tried to get back with her, and basically shot and killed her. Yeah.
How did that tragedy change you?
Well, it's in a lot of ways, certainly, but I guess the short version is it's made me try to want to be a better person and try to maybe emulate the characteristics of my sister Jill.
We're about out of time. Any final thoughts, Buzz?
Well, I would just say that domestic violence is something that at a minimum is going to cause stress and pain. It can certainly change a life, as we both know, Mike, very personally, and in some cases it can take a life. And I would just say that there's lots of opportunities to reach out to family and friends, and certainly the WCA and other agencies like that are available for those that think that there might be some issue like that.
Great. Well, Buzz, thank you for being here. You wanted to ask me something?
Yeah, I told Mike that I wanted to reserve the last question for myself, and he's been a good friend. I just think the world of him. But we have a friend in common in Father Val Peter at Boys Town, who just retired here recently, and he's always given people advice on speeches, how to give them. And so I'm going to ask Mike what
I know this.
Father Peter's advice is when giving a speech.
It's good. Be inspirational, be brief, and be gone. It's time for us to be gone. All right? All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great job.